Okay, welcome to the Easthampton City Council Ordinance Subcommittee meeting of March 7th. Everybody's here. We don't have we don't have any minutes to approve, and if there's anybody here from the public to speak on any things that are not on our agenda, feel free. But I think that Creamy, you're probably here for something on the agenda, so that's fine. And we just to clarify. The proposal to seek over-quota liquor licenses is no longer with us. We moved it.
And we could have voted that sucker tonight.
Oh yeah, we could have. We could have. So I mean, it would have been easy, but poor rules. They had nothing to do.
I know they're.
And so
Giving it to property.
Tonight's meeting is for the topics on our agenda that are not the welcoming community.
Exactly.
So you know, and I'm happy. I think. Some of the things that we wanted to look at tonight was, this was my thought, was that we would take a look at the cannabis equity tonight and see if we can get something going with it, see if we can maybe move that.
That sucker rock and roll.
I would agree with that notion.
And I think at the last meeting we decided we were going to hold off on the open container thing for a little while. As our bike thing is on hold. Because he's not here, and I think the next step was us looking at it,
Okay.
And seeing how that's going to climb big hills. And then you know, looking at the on and off street parking, and I just have a couple thoughts on that. I don't think that we're necessarily going to come to any sort of conclusions with that tonight.
All right.
So,
Mm-hmm.
and then you know, also looking at schedule.
Okay.
So I'd say let's go to cannabis equity.
We have minutes from January 30th. I don't know, have they been approved?
January 30th. Was that when you and I met and you said to hold off on voting on them? I'm trying to remember.
I can't remember.
Well, you know what? It doesn't hurt to approve to.
May I see which ones those are?
Yeah. And
I think that's the one I wasn't here, right?
Yes. No.
Okay.
Oh, right. This was the one where I came late.
You just sent them not too terribly long ago.
But I think we approved these, didn't we?
I thought we did
would have
last
had
meeting.
to approve them on February 23rd or 13th, and we believe that we did.
I believe that we did.
Because we approved two sets. One which you
I abstained and one.
Gotcha.
So I
that's
believe
right.
so.
Okay. So
Yeah.
we're
And I
good.
was just telling the chair that I believe that there's some from like last year, which I tell you exactly which one it was.
Barbara hasn't killed you yet?
There's one from the week prior to, I think, the public hearing where Councilor Kwasinski came and presented on all the available areas, and I think for some reason that's been in the back of my mind. I think I haven't done it, but I'm not sure. So I'll double check.
If you have those, then for our next, we could even do them on Monday.
Yeah.
To start off.
Okay.
Clean
All
things
right.
up.
And in regards to our last minutes, I just have to go back because there was so much public speak. I want to make sure I didn't miss somebody. So I'm gonna. It's just a matter. I'm gonna have to watch it all over.
No problem. No problem.
Okay.
So let's now. I believe where we left off with the cannabis equity, you had some stuff that you were talking with Jeff Bag about. Is that? Does my memory serve me correctly there?
Yeah, I mean, basically where I was with the planner was that I don't think he has a general objection to this, and I think he also, you know, there's a huge process that this has to go through once it is a subcommittee. It has to go to planning has to approve it, then we have to have the joint meetings, then it goes, then they make a recommendation, then we have to bring it to the city council, then we have to hold a public hearing. So there's a lot that happens between here and there. My understanding, and he's not here, but I think in philosophically he didn't disagree with any of the proposal. There may be some nuts and bolts things that are beyond my...
That we fine tune as we go.
Correct. So, but I don't think he disagrees with it on its merits.
Okay.
And I've had extensive discussions with, I've gotten input from Shalene Title, who's the chair of the Cannabis Control Commission. We've had a number of discussions. I can't say that the commission endorses it because it's not.
Sorry.
Are we talking open container or equity?
Equity.
Oh, all right.
I think that, unless there's, and look, I get it, you know, we initially start off with a recommendation of 12 licenses coming from the planning board. We narrowed that down to 6. I know I'm proposing more, and I understand that that causes some potential friction, but it's equity.
Right.
And so if we, look, essentially we only have really one license available, and to say, well, okay, well, we're gonna set that one license aside, that's not equitable.
Right.
And if there, it's all about discussion, right? So, I mean, if I wanted to really be equitable, I'd say, well, we should keep basically the 5 that are basically spoken for, and we should create 5 more. Now I think that's not reasonable.
Well, I mean, it's not unreasonable. I
Yeah.
think that it might be unpalatable for people.
I completely agree, and that's why I felt that like 3, basically 2 more was a reasonable place to start,
Right.
and doesn't basically make a group of people who are potentially already marginalized and disenfranchised fighting over a single license. And the reality of these licenses too is that they may never get filled
Right.
because of the hurdles that the groups that I've outlined within kind of this equity, this equity framework, how they can potentially get funding and kind of jump through all the hoops on the state level.
side.
Yeah.
Question.
Councilor Connor.
So we have, whatever we have, 6 now? And 5 are spoken for of the 6? Ish? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so we add 3 more.
2.
2, okay, 5,
Yeah.
and then we make it 5 and 3.
Correct.
Okay, so is there room to, if we have 5 spoken for and the 3 just sit there for years, let's say, do we have room that we can write something around that after a certain time?
Like a valve, like a safety valve. So
Yeah.
if nobody fills those in a certain time and there is an application that isn't an equity application, that could potentially be transferred
Potentially.
over.
Yeah, I mean, and then the next person in the door might be equity, but and the reason where I'm going with that is at least up to 6 maybe we could, maybe one of the 3 if it's not taken by X number of thing, we can give it to a non-equity group. Just because I don't know how long we want to have them sitting unused.
So I think that's an interesting idea. I thought about 2. I think Somerville did something similar with, I think, a period of 2 years. I would argue that with what's potentially already going to be saturation, that I think it's a good idea. I think it should be like 5 years on our
Okay.
end, because I think it should have to be reviewed by either ordinance or the city council in order to approve that change too. That after X amount of time, it should be maybe a review. Maybe after 2 years, we review it
Yeah.
to determine.
see if it.
Yeah, because 5
Because-
seems like a long time.
So maybe a 2-year review.
2-year review, and then I think that what that'll allow is it'll allow the market to kind of settle in, to kind of see what the supply and demand is looking like, and it will just be a good, I think, vantage point to be able to make a decision into the future after 2 years.
And then my other, just general, I don't understand, is how the application process works and I guess this is the CCC has come up with these definitions. How those translate into actionable policy on the city side.
Mhm.
And that's where I'm just not, I don't understand how we get from here to something that we can enforce.
So I think this is where the discussion on the planning board level and the input from the planner comes in. My thought, and I don't remember what version you have, but basically. So let me I just want to see. I apologize that this is out on my phone as opposed to my.
We're
So-
not good at versioning.
So the most recent version, I have a 10.10.4.4.1. No, sorry. Yes, it's an addition to my proposed amendment for 10.10.4.4.1, where there's a last paragraph that says, applications for Easthampton equity special permits shall include a cover letter detailing the category under which they are applying, B, the summary of how the applicants meet the criteria, and C, appropriate accompanying documentation to demonstrate how the applicants meet the criteria for equity application.
Okay,
And
I
that
don't
would,
have that version, but you
okay.
can send it to me.
I
Do we, yeah, I'm just looking for it right now. Do we have that?
I thought I gave it to you last time.
No,
Um,
well, I'm so organized.
I can email it to you right now. It's a paragraph attached to it of pre-existing. Yeah.
Is it this one?
That's just a letter.
Yeah, this one doesn't have an
kind of
attachment.
background.
If you could forward that again, that'd be
Yeah,
awesome.
but basically that's what it is. It's basically just asking, to explain, and then I think technically, the planner or the planning department could come back and say, or after the first, because there'd be an initial review, at which time the planning board says, well, we either, yes, this answers our question, or we don't have adequate
Information
documentation.
yeah.
Yeah.
Is there anyone in the room? Any commentary to this?
Hi.
Go ahead, Karima.
Hi, my name's Karima Risk, and I'm a resident, and I'm delighted to be here. First of all, thanks for making time. This is an issue that's really important to me, near and dear to my heart, so I want to take out the time to come here. I think I'm going to speak more to the substance of the ordinance, and some of the details I know will evolve as they go through the process of public hearings. I think this is a really important, urgent, and time-sensitive matter that I would encourage you to pass to the next process, and that hopefully we can pass in a timely manner. There is, Councilor Zander mentioned, there's a mandate for equity in our law under Chapter 94G and also in the regulations, and I think not only do we have the authority for such an ordinance, I think we are obligated, certainly from an equity provision, doing a morally just thing. I also think it's in the best interest of our local residents who you guys are here to represent. I think in terms of time-sensitive nature, I think there's a limited cap on the licenses. As was mentioned a little earlier, there's a cap of 6 licenses. Potentially 5 of which are spoken. As of the last planning board meeting, there were 3. It's good to just pause and kind of take stock of the diversity, or which do and don't fall in there. And so 4, potentially more, are large state, multi-state operators. None of them fit any of these parity or equity categories, whatever the terminology you'd like to use. And I am particularly, as a local resident, really concerned about the monopolies and the multi-state organizations that are quickly claiming the opportunities.
Is that like the one in Northampton that got bought up?
Exactly.
How about
That has
Georgia
been,
or
yeah, that's been the trend right on the ground here in Massachusetts, and it's happening in Western Mass. It's happening, and things are changing quickly. There's things I can't talk about, but I can definitely see this happening real time. That I know is happening. So. I think it's really paramount to preserve opportunities for local Easthampton residents and priority groups, inclusive of women, minorities, and I'd even include, I think in the version I didn't see it, but veteran-owned as well. Those are all categories in terms of Councilor Khanna's question about how we, in the process, we look at those. So there is a CCC process to designate economic empowerment. And then I can say, just as a local resident, I now fit that criteria, so I'm really excited about that. If and when they open it up, and I think it's anticipated, it's a designation they gave for 2 weeks only. And anyone who meets that criteria, who's still working on their business, can't yet get it, but it's broadly hoped for and assumed that it may open up, because there's a big pool of people, myself included, who fall in that category. So I think it's important to preserve it. I think it's really important to look at equity. Not only a really interesting trend that we've seen is that it slows down growth. Many people think when you're talking, for example, talking about local licenses or caps and things, what we've seen as a pattern, and I think the fact that economic empowerment candidates haven't come out of the spigot from the application shows, and people have been saying this, and I myself can say this, it just takes longer. It's taking at least 1, maybe 2 years for these businesses to get through. Everything from finding a location to fundraising to just going through the business process and the special permit. you guys, if you can think of how small local applicants, quickly they come and how, what the resources are like. So all those things slow people down. So if there are protections or priority for local residents and these parity applicants, I would believe that the development of the market of those existing licenses would slow down. So while it may seem increasing where there's concerns about that, it may actually kind of slow the progress. I think you guys talked about that, with people getting stuck in the pipeline. I think it's really good that you review that. I think it's also really good to periodically in that process take stock of if any licenses, liquor licenses, have been raised. I think there's a really brief allusion to that. I don't know the status of that, but those things are going, and of course the cap is tied towards that 20% mandate from the state, so that's important. I would also, just as a last thing, to encourage you guys to consider if it's viable, allowing small scale greenhouse cultivation in some of those more farmland residential zones. I don't know if that's something in the works at all, but I mention it in the context of parity and access to this market because there are small farmers and other people in our market who are local residents, and these are also special classes of licenses, whether they're a cooperative or a micro business. They have the right to cultivate, and they have both standards set for local residents, like the 12-year residence requirement, 12-month residence requirement, and also in terms of the caps on tiers of cultivation, so it keeps it small. So that's something that may be easier an opportunity, but you might not be able to. So those are my thoughts. If you guys have any questions too, I'm more than happy to just share any of my experiences. And thank you for your time.
Yeah.
Could I ask a question? Because it kind of flew past me. When you were talking about, I don't even know what it was, because that's how fast it flew past me. It was about you fall into a certain category. What is that category?
Sure. So it gets confusing, and I'm more than happy to kind of tease that out. So there's a specific defined category in the CCC regulations and licensing process called economic empowerment applicant.
Oh.
They have a complicated 6-tier, point qualification of which you need to have 3 of these to qualify. One of the criteria that's worked into there, I think it's actually a couple demographics of where you live. So if you're an Easthampton resident, we do not fall into the 43 disproportionate communities.
Right, like
It's
if it was
even
Springfield, it
harder.
probably would.
Exactly. Now, I still can qualify for it. I just have to meet some of, 4 out of 6, hit some of the other check boxes to make that 3 out of 6. Yeah.
So one would be gender, right? Is it
No.
female isn't?
So no, unfortunately. So, and that's a good point actually. So, female and veteran-owned are not.
They're not in there?
However, the CCC has talked about this in their public meetings, and they have charged municipalities with crafting or customizing their ordinances to support these broader business development goals and local economic development. One conversation that's going in that direction, and I certainly am going to offer these very pointed comments at the March 12th CCC hearing in Springfield, is that they're looking at the Office of Procurement for the state certifies small businesses, and I think the other one's the Office of Diversity that certifies minority and women-owned businesses.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they want to the goal is to make this more inclusive.
Mm-hmm.
Specifically the provisions for race and these disproportionate impact, that mandate comes from Chapter 24G.
Right.
So they're trying to marry the two. But certainly.
So currently, women-owned is not part of the criteria for
It's
the.
not.
It's not, that's why I added it in.
Okay, that's
because
what
I
I
think
was-
that,
But it is
I have a
encouraged.
guidance document I could read to you guys about the
Absolutely.
empowerment, but, yeah, that's why I added women and minorities, because you could be a minority and still have every reason to fall under the criteria of what we would consider equity, but not fall into the state criteria.
Right.
And so-
To that point, I just wanted to offer one other point thing is that I think the state got it wrong, and I think a lot of people are coming back because it's so narrowly defined.
Mm-hmm.
For example, you could be Native American and just as, wronged by even cannabis, as other proportions, or you can be in other certain demographics where you very justifiably and equitably, you can be a veteran and you're not an equity applicant. So this is kind of a more broad way, and they have discussed that. It seems to be in there.
That's why I sought to broaden what the state, the somewhat well-thought concepts of the state, but kind of
Mhm.
expanded on our level.
And I think the CCC has also been very careful to make it customizable for the city, so that if that's something you support, you can incorporate that into your ordinance. But they don't want to be overly prescriptive and
Mhm.
regulate exactly what it's going to be.
Sure.
And are these the 6 then? Or no, it can't be
No.
because that's a woman.
No.
I haven't, I'd have to find that, so, I have a guidance document. I had somewhere the actual law, if you want me to kind of read really quickly to you, that's
fine.
The entire law?
No.
Just the
So
relevant
economic,
part.
priority review will be granted economic empowerment applicants who demonstrate 3 of the following criteria. Majority of ownership belongs to people who have lived in areas of disproportionate impact for 5 of the last 10 years. Majority of ownership has held 1 or more previous positions where the primary population served were disproportionately impacted, or where primary responsibilities included economic education, resource
Time out.
provision.
Can you go back to that one? And
Working with
I
the
didn't get
population?
that.
Is that, so
A
if you were a
person-
teacher that,
I'm going to qualify. So if you provide, for example, business development services in Holyoke or Springfield, these
Yeah.
areas, you're providing some kind of training to them to
Okay.
empower them.
Okay, sorry, go ahead.
That's okay. Where would you like me to do? I'm just,
right where you left off is fine.
okay. Primary responsibilities include resource provision or empowerment to disproportionately impacted individuals or communities. Do you want me to just email you guys this?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. So you kind of get the gist?
Yes.
Roughly, it's like if you've been arrested or your parent has been arrested or a spouse has been
Sure.
arrested. If you live here, if your parent is in the area.
Yep.
Here, I'll send you guys this.
Oh, okay. Okay.
And there's also equity applicants, which is this kind of a separate, it's interesting, there's like a state equity program, which is like a.
But
it's
nobody's
confusing.
qualified
Is
under
this
that yet, right?
CCC?
It's like,
Explain that. That is, those are the regulations.
For the CCC. And then there's something separate that's
And if I
called parity or equity or?
This
There's
is a-
equity. I had initially called this parity so as not to be confused with the state equity program, but I decided after some discussion just to change it back and just call it Easthampton Equity, so it's clear that it's just a municipal-based equity program, because I think the word equity is important in this discussion.
Yeah.
So would, Creamer, are you suggesting that that criteria be folded into something we do, or it's already out there?
It's
We're
already,
just-
yeah. So you can incorporate that as a class.
Reference it.
And you could, I would advocate for you guys or the city to be more inclusive because that supports the goals. I think the concern why they didn't mandate it, and I asked this of Commissioner Title and myself, why wasn't it a broader, more inclusive minority group?
Yeah.
And the mandate for those 6 groups comes directly from the law. But they also support the other goals of women and minorities, and those have also been in the conversation.
So if that law changes, would it then be reflected, if the rules that they guided on the race one there, if the law that guided them changed to be more inclusive, then would that de facto make this more inclusive, or would they have to rewrite this?
Well, these are regulation-based, so the CCC would have to update
Their
their
regulations
regulations to
to
follow
match
the
the
law.
law.
But if there is a term economic empowerment applicated. And if I may, I know it's really confusing, but I think it's really helpful to go through the social equity because they're thrown around. You have that classification of, you can get a status as an applicant, but then they have a social equity program. And then if you're an economic empowerment applicant, one of these 6 criteria, or 3 out of 6, you automatically qualify for the social equity program, like a little box over here.
Okay.
However, if you're not in this group of automatically, if you don't have that
Yep.
designation, you can automatically, you can come in over here, not designated, you didn't have your 2-week thing, and you can be one of 3 criteria. You can be, have been arrested for that, you can be a spouse of someone, or I think it's directly disproportionate area residents. So if you meet these 3 categories, you can actually jump into the social equity program on top of the economic empowerment.
Okay.
And that's in the guidance document I sent you as well.
She uses better props to explain it. If
You mean
could-
like-
If you could do that, and just start stacking things, that'd be very helpful.
Yeah.
Okay, so as far as the pieces in here, is there anything that you feel like we need to modify before we move it out of committee, or do you feel comfortable the way it is in its current incarnation?
Well, the only thing I would add on was what was very wisely suggested was what I would think a review at 2 years.
2 years.
I would hesitate. I'd be hesitant to.
Make it an automatic?
Yeah, I think it should
Yeah,
be.
a discussion.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I think maybe should it be the ordinance?
It should probably be
subcommittee?
ordinance, yeah.
Yeah, and so I think that it should be a discussion. I think otherwise, I've kind of revised this a bunch of times, and so.
Have you read this out?
I just, yeah.
I've revised this a bunch of times. I've received input from people involved at the state level that have looked through it, and they on a personal, non-official level, they're happy with it.
Well, I mean, and I think, one of the things that you mentioned before that's absolutely accurate is this is just the beginning of a process that's going to be pretty comprehensive. And it's important to remember that if we feel like things need to be modified or tweaked as we move, that's perfectly within the purview of the process as we kind of conference with planning. And even if we decide, if they have recommendations that we think are good, we can put in. If they have recommendations that we decide not to take, we can decide not to take those and move those in the, it would just be their recommendation would have certain things that they would want to have in there. We don't necessarily have to take those.
Right.
But I don't see any reason why this can't get moved on to the next phase.
And what is the next phase going to?
So this would be a referral to the planning board, which then starts the clock.
And what's the clock?
Clock is.
Somewhere, yeah.
Do you have it?
I could find it.
It basically just means that within 30 days we have to have. They have to have a written copy, and then within 60 days we have to have a meeting, and then within 30 days of that we have to.
And those are their rules.
No, that's state rule.
Yeah,
Oh,
state
it is.
rule, and I have.
Is that
And
a
I should know it,
cannabis
but I should
thing, or is it
honestly,
just-
I should have this committed to memory.
Is that a cannabis thing or
No.
just planning?
Just planning.
Okay.
Just it's zoning.
Yeah.
If you give me a second, I might actually.
I'm really actually embarrassed that I don't have it committed to
I
memory. I've been doing this
have
for a
it.
long time.
Oh, here it is. City zoning flow chart. So let me actually first save this to a PDF. And okay, so.
What would we do with that?
Right?
All right.
Well, I used to have it on a folder inside, but I don't need it anymore because I have my phone.
Okay, so basically where we are right now is ordinance or amendment is submitted to city council. Okay, within 14 days. So we'd have to send this.
No, it got its first reading.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean,
Okay.
I think that's what that's.
All right.
from.
So then within 14 days, the city council submits the proposal to the planning board for review. Then a notice of public hearing is posted, published, and sent by city council or committee appointed to hold the hearing. Okay, at some point. I don't think there's a timeline for that. Then after that, at least 14 days after that posting, public hearings held by planning board and joint city council or committee, which in this case is ordinance, must be held within 65 days after proposal
65 days,
is submitted to planning board. Then within 21 days, planning board report is received, or may vote after 21 days have elapsed without report. That's it. Then city council must vote within 90 days after it holds public hearing. Yeah.
Yep.
So there's some. Do you want me to send you this flow chart?
Please.
Sure.
Yeah, right.
I have it somewhere, but it never hurts to have an extra copy.
All right. Well, here we go. City zoning flow chart. So- There is no such thing as insiders in the city of Easthampton. We maintain complete transparency.
Pure
Yeah,
transparency.
it's probably on, is it on the planning board documents?
Yeah.
I mean, this is an open meeting, and I would not
Very
ever
transparent.
assume that anything within this meeting is considered. So I'm more than happy to. What's your name again? Karima Risk?
Yes, I'm a resident.
Oh, okay.
Of Easthampton?
All right. So here I'm sending this now. City zoning flow chart. So, unless you have any questions, I'd like to make a motion.
I am perfectly happy to have you make a motion.
Perfectly. Wow.
Perfectly.
So, I would like to make a motion to accept the most recent language of the Easthampton equity cannabis applicants, with the addition of language that will include a two-year review by the Ordinance Subcommittee. Was there anything else we were adding?
And to send to planning board.
To be sent to, I was just trying to think if there was anything else we were considering adding. That's it, right?
Yeah.
No.
That's it. To be sent to the planning board.
And 201.
We have a second.
Second.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. Great.
So,
And on-
when would you, I can get this to you guys certainly by the next meeting? Do you want to?
As soon as you can send it to me, that would be great. And what
Alright.
I'll do is I'll forward it to Barbara and Jeff.
You can
I could
stay.
potentially
And I'll-
have it to you guys
Rest of our-
tomorrow.
That's
I
fine.
just
If you
have-
get
I
it to
just
me-
have a- yeah.
If you get it to me tomorrow, I'll send it directly to Barb and Jeff, and that will we'll get it going.
Cool, great,
Awesome.
all right.
It'll be fast.
All right.
So what,
So all right. So I wanted to just talk about a little bit about the parking thing. Is that all right?
no, I
I
want.
want you to.
Okay. So I gave this a lot of thought, and it was really interesting. I don't know if you guys have been driving around the city thinking about this parking thing. So there's a couple pieces here, and I think one of them dovetails really nicely into the issue that you brought to public safety, which is like a review of
Yes.
all the parking in Easthampton.
Mhm.
So what I'm thinking is the parking in the street part of this, I'm thinking can kind of layer with what public safety is doing, because what I found out yesterday, or maybe it was on Tuesday at the public safety meeting, is that the city right now is currently doing a full inventory of parking in Easthampton.
Yes, and that's where my parking thing is. It's with that, that is rolling into that consultant.
So perfect. And so I think that, as I drive through the city and I see some of our narrow residential streets, and I imagine if everybody decided to park in the street, it's like, whoa, this could be, but it's not. If you drive down, it's in the Plains. What is the name of the street? It's Kingsbury, maybe. It's in my precinct.
Yeah.
It's the newer.
The newer development of like there's
Yeah.
not many trees and
Yeah.
like kind of bigger
Yeah,
houses.
Kingsbury.
Yes,
Yeah.
I mean, if you
Buff Strong.
those yes,
Yeah.
those are narrow.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And if people decide that they're gonna not park in their driveways and park in the street, that could be a really interesting issue.
Mhm.
But it's not happening.
Right.
But it is happening in other areas in town. So I think that piece is not worth. It's not ready for the scrap heap yet. Currently we have November through April. We have no overnight parking in the streets.
Mhm.
My son's girlfriend found that out the hard way the other night.
Ooh.
Got towed. But
Really?
you know what it was. I mean, it's kind of ironic here because we have this little place in the bottom of the driveway where she can pull in, but it was snowed in, so she pulled up on the side of the road. But our across the street neighbor, they're the girlfriend of their son who lives there did the exact same thing. So they were like, they made the road narrow enough that the plow couldn't get through.
Oh, and the plow called, wow.
So, and I was like, told you. I was like, who are you gonna tell first? Well, they both got towed. So,
Oh, good. Well.
so I felt good about that. At least we're able to mitigate the issue, even if it was a pain for them. But
Yeah, I agree. All things parking, we need to wait until the consultant does their review. So my thing is safety, and this thing, roll it in there and we'll revisit it when that we're talking about.
that's what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
And we can kind of, make that determination as it comes out. Because there probably are some residential streets where it might be, for example, South Street. It might make sense for there to not be parking
Right.
on that street.
Right.
And
right.
currently, there's no restriction of parking on South, South Street, it's a narrow, windy road. And so that can potentially cause problems.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you may have to say on the following streets, on-street parking is forbidden.
Right.
Yeah.
And we'll, that inventory, I think, will really help us kind of get a handle of that.
Yeah.
Now, the other issue was, parking on the lawn. And I think where I want to narrow the scope of that a little bit and just say, if people are going to park on their front lawn, I don't have any problem with people parking on their back of but if people are going to use their frontage as parking space, I think the area of focus that I would like to get into is, should we have a buffer from property lines to how close people can park their stuff?
I think there should be.
Yeah,
And-
absolutely,
and if
just like
they're-
anything else.
Right. And if we're gonna have a buffer, I think that probably an intelligent way to go about it is, so we don't encumber people with unnecessary, burdensome things, but allow neighbors to have some space in there. have a special permit that would allow for someone to park closer than whatever the buffer is, but it would have to be with permission of their neighbors.
I like
Special
that.
permit would have to be granted with permission.
Sure.
So
and the amount of people who would probably have to apply for that would be very small. But
It would be very small.
But it shows flexibility by the municipal government to say that, basically we're willing to waive this.
We're willing to waive
10
it,
foot or whatever.
especially if your neighbors are okay with it.
Right.
But if you're negatively impacting your neighbors, if you're negatively impacting property values because you are not being respectful, and we know that they're, in an ideal world, everybody would be respectful and everybody would be cognizant of what their neighbors wanted. But in reality, there are people that are, not necessarily as respectful as we would hold the ideal to be.
Mhm.
So anyway, I just wanted to, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna kind of mock up, what that buffer language would look like and what the special permit process would look like, and I think then I'll bring that back
Question.
to us, please.
Is there any conflict, or if you got 9 cars in your front yard because you own a business of Joe's Bar Grill and parking, is there any violation of the zoning of your property if it's meant to be residential and you've got 100 commercial trucks on it?
I poured through the zoning, and I couldn't find anything. The only thing was in certain planned developments. God, it's slipping me now. Planned neighborhood. It was overlaid zoning we did back when Stuart Beckley was here. There is some language around that, but nowhere else in the zoning, and that only applies to those certain areas. And if it's in this type of planned development, really it's basically saying like, there's nothing about parking
Yeah.
on your front lawn, which is really strange, because if you, for example, if you go to Kingsbury, if you look at those front yards and you see there's no trees, so there's all these big houses and they all have these giant front yards. Can you imagine if one of them just had rows of cars parked in the front? It would look so out of
Well,
place.
and they're kind of hilly, aren't they? Don't they slope down the street?
Well, in some places they're flat, but
Yeah.
I mean, it would look very strange. But then you have other residential streets. I mean, I think it's maybe Strong or Line, where there is someone who is using their front yard as they have a boat and they have a
Mhm.
truck and they have
Yeah.
a trailer and they use the whole front of their yard.
Should we require that the vehicles have to be registered?
I think so. And that currently is a requirement. You can't have more than one unregistered vehicle on your property in sight. But I think Bob said, or the chief said, that someone put a tarp on it,
Right.
and they were able to say that it was out of sight.
Yeah.
So anyway, but I think that this is probably an easy place to start. I think it's a good question for Jeff.
Yep.
Because, I mean, I wasn't able to find it. It doesn't mean it doesn't exist.
Mhm.
So that's a question
I'll
that
follow.
we can find out. But that's I just wanted to give you guys an update of where I'm not trying to make people pave their front yards or. I think the best one was that we're trying to get people to pave their front yards so we can charge
Charge
more
more.
for sewage fees.
I mean, look, I don't care if people park on their lawn.
That's
I think at the end of the day, the biggest thing I care about in that aspect is just as long as they're being fair to their neighbors.
Right.
The street stuff, I care about safety,
Mhm.
and that's like a clear and present public safety issue. And
Right.
so that's where that crafting of that language comes into play.
Right, and I think the pieces that, for the safety piece, as we get this parking review, we might want to say, like, that, driveways and road intersections, like, you shouldn't be able to park at a certain
Right.
Right, but then,
distance.
yeah, we talked about that. Or like on a narrow street,
Sidelines.
like if one person's already parked on one side, you can't necessarily park
on the other side.
Then I don't know how we're gonna
It's gonna be
define.
staggered.
Yeah, we're gonna have to figure out, like, or maybe just use like loose language,
Like, 2 cars should be able to pass freely.
correct.
something like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah,
Um,
I don't wanna make it too complicated.
Yeah. So anyway, I just wanted to give you all an update on that, because it did raise some ire, but I feel like it's pretty innocuous.
I agree.
So Anyway.
And that teaches us a lesson of not to just throw something out there,
Don't give me
just to
Don't give me that.
just to check the box of, we got some documentation.
Well, there was some interesting stuff in there, and I was, I thought it would be, and we just pick out the parts we wanted.
Oh, no.
Yeah, well,
That's not
no,
how
because
things work.
that's nuance. You know.
No, yeah.
that-
But
that's-
I did go through it and write nope,
I know you
because
did.
I said that I did.
I know.
Nope, we're not doing that.
No.
Nope.
No. Okay. So I think that takes us to the end of our road.
Right, because we're not,
What
we're
about,
lawn.
Yeah.
let's see,
So, yeah, so I think we should. I
open
think we should-
consumption, what are we doing about that?
We kind of tabled that until we get more, we're basically waiting for the, I
The
think.
CCC to.
Yeah, both of you had, I think astutely suggested that we put it through as a package and we wait until the CCC comes out with information about, some more information this summer.
Yeah.
That may or may not affect what I'm proposing.
Okay.
That was moved through. What about adult use cannabis establishment? That was.
So one of the things that that's a blanket one that we kept on here in
Yeah.
case Jeff needed to
Make
bring
some
anything
tweaking.
back for tweaking, and he said that he might, but then I haven't really heard from him since then. But I think one of the things that Karima brought up is, which is relevant, is we do not have currently any sort of regulations for a small greenhouse.
Yeah.
And so that could be, looking at creating some guidelines around, if someone wanted to do like a craft greenhouse. That would, so we would just have to look at like mitigating smell and light, all the,
Yeah.
it's something that we might want to look at.
Yeah.
And then do we want to revisit it when the CCC comes out with their, don't they owe us like the final adult use cannabis regulations?
So towards the end of March, they're gonna talk about both delivery and,
Social consumption.
social consumption. I don't think necessarily there's really any restrictions around greenhouse.
No.
Right, but what about like cafes?
Yes,
That's
that's coming.
end of March.
Yeah,
So
that's-
this is separate, so.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, this could be, this could
I just have adult use
include.
cannabis establishments, so what I was thinking of, we would want to, as soon as those regulations come out, get on our.
Oh, absolutely. We have it on there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so I don't wanna I both don't wanna limit it to greenhouse nor take it
No,
off.
that's
No,
why
no,
that's
they're
why we
just-
have it on there as broad.
Correct.
So basically, as that's on our
Things can
agenda,
fall under it.
we can have, it's a catch-all.
Gotcha.
So if greenhouses, if we decide that's something we want to look at,
We could do that while
social
we're waiting for
consumption,
others.
delivery, those are like, I would say, the only other piece that could be a moving piece there is, a larger outdoor grows, which is probably less of an issue here. It's more for like more rural areas. But, that being on our agenda, we can cover the whole gamut.
Okay.
I mean, I would like to see people in our town have options what to do with like farmland or rural
Yeah.
land instead of just selling out to a solar developer.
Yeah.
Not that there's anything wrong with solar, but I
No.
think use farmland, the local farming industry has kind of gone away.
Right.
Like, this is an opportunity to reinvigorate it.
Absolutely. I agree 100%.
So I'd, love to look at, some ideas as to how we can, talk about greenhouse growing.
Yep.
Wanna see what a big nerd I am?
You made like a
I made a spreadsheet, but then I also put an aging of how old the thing is.
Nice.
Yeah. 333 days. That means it's almost been out for a
Like
year.
a Google document with that.
Yeah.
Huh?
We should do that.
Does it count the days automatically? Because
Oh,
that
I-
would be really.
I
That would
put a
be really
formula
cool.
in there.
Oh, you did?
I put today minus, I put the date that we put it on the first time, the first.
And today's
meeting.
date, and the
Cool.
current
And
date.
then I do have a formula that says minus today.
Jeez.
Oh,
I like that. I like
So
that.
if I reran this today, it would be a different number.
Nice. Well, that's very cool. I think what is going to be interesting though is as social consumption comes out, as delivery comes out. We're already we already have it in our zoning,
Right.
so it's just basically us kind of filling in the blanks.
Activating.
Mm-hmm.
And also discussing it and talking about are there any further guidelines that we want to have.
Yeah.
So, and it's starting to look like that's going to be pretty close, and it looks like it also that the referendum thing is getting hopefully some movement where we're not going to have to deal with that.
Right, so there is, I mean, I have to talk to him, but the whole like opt-out versus opt-in, which is where it is right now, that there's, right, so Aaron Vega's introduced a amendment that 94G, basically saying, like, right, that we can vote on it as a city council instead of having to put it to, elections. So I don't know where that is. I mean, the state might even step in and say this is, although they still have to ratify the MGL. The CCC can't do that on their own, but I think there's movement there. That made me think about something I just wanted to say, and now I'm blanking on what it was. My only concern with delivery is that we did include that passage that was introduced as an amendment at our public hearing about mobile sales or mobile and
like ice cream cart sales or
yeah, and I think the intention at that point was the thinking that there would be a loophole, and I was concerned about this at the time, was the intention was that someone could create a loophole by basically having like a mobile home and like getting a license. Of course, like the issue there is that the state would never have licensed that. And I didn't want to get into it at the hearing.
Right.
But what I'm worried about is that we may have to look at that language and make sure it does not restrict us from having delivery.
Right.
So
I think that makes sense, and maybe at our not Monday, but our next meeting we can pull that, and we can take a look at that. You know what? Let's just. I mean, Peg, if this are like let's pull the ordinance for our next meeting and go through it just together.
Yes.
Let's go through it again. And make sure that there aren't other things like that are going to trip us up as we move forward.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
Fine idea.
So we're going to talk about meeting.
Set a meeting.
Yes.
Yes.
And regular
So listen,
meetings.
Tuesdays are fine for me. I think it's like the if I know Tuesdays are fine for me. I'll just move.
So
things
if
I
we
need
pick
to.
like either the first and third or the second and fourth Tuesday of every month, say like 5 or 5:15.
Second and fourth.
When does finance meet? Don't they meet on Tuesdays?
Wednesdays.
Oh, they meet Wednesdays.
Yeah,
Oh,
Wednesdays.
Really?
Yep.
Before city council or something?
Yeah, because I had a
No,
solid
alternate.
alternate. I had a
Oh.
solid 3-hour meeting the other night.
But
so
doesn't
that was
public safety meet on Tuesdays also?
Tuesday, but it's only the first Tuesday of every month. So if we do
Oh.
second and fourth Tuesday, then we're good.
Okay. So you want
Let's do second and fourth Tuesday. Is that
School committee meeting.
to five? Is 5:15 okay? Or you want to do 5 or
5:15's probably.
or 5:30?
I'm good.
All right, so where are we now? We are the 7th. That
We're in
means.
City Hall.
Stop.
So
So
we're-
today's the 7th. That means
And we're gonna have the 11th, so the next one should be the 26th.
the 26th. Yeah.
And then second and fourth after
Yep.
that.
Ooh,
Are
no,
we,
I got lost.
are we down with it? Only
Yeah.
because, I would say we could do the 12th as well, but I'll be traveling.
And we're doing 5:15. Is that what we're
Is
saying?
that okay with you guys? Just in
Yeah,
terms
no,
of,
I love
could be
early
here for
meetings.
5, but
No,
it's-
5:15 is fine.
Okay.
It gives me,
Yeah.
yeah. It's not going to be getting dark, so I can get out on my bike before. That's good. Okay. Now, can I make this repeated?
Well, that's the question. Because if you say every other week, you might get, unless you.
No, you can do a
smart-
second and fourth.
You can.
Repeat. I have daily, weekly, monthly, year custom. Every week, weekly, every second. Every second. Oh, it doesn't.
Oh, it's not.
It doesn't allow me to
weekly.
do every fourth.
Oh, every weekly, every 1 week. Maybe
Let's see,
that's the
repeat.
calendar.
You could do every 2 weeks, but then technically, every 2 weeks might not line up with,
Right.
yeah.
I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to
Custom,
do.
eh? Frequency,
Do it monthly and do it, when you do monthly, it will say, like, whatever that Tuesday is, just do that one and then make it a second one for the fourth Wednesday or Tuesday. I don't know.
I have a weekly, I have a every 2 weeks.
This is how complex our lives are. This is the hardest thing we've done tonight.
Yeah.
I could tell it to do every week on Tuesday and then go back and erase the ones that I don't want. Because if I say every 2 weeks, that's not necessarily.
You know what I'm gonna do?
Hmm?
I'm gonna do two separate ones. Ordinance. One that's every 2 weeks and one that's every 4 weeks. Or you know what I mean?
Oh, you are.
Yeah.
But will that necessarily line up with the second or fourth? If there's like a week, if there's a week that
This
has.
is lame.
I think.
Hi, everyone.
Calendar is
Yeah, we can. You know what? We could probably adjourn and figure this
Yeah.
out
Figure this
after,
out.
since this is
Yeah.
something that.
I'm sure they're all riveted by
Yeah.
this.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All right. Thank you.